Okay, everybody, as promised, we're going to be talking about our augmented 6 chords today. So, augmented 6 chords are drawn from the larger family of altered chords. And altered chords, you remember, are non-diatonic chords, chords that have been chromatically altered to deviate from the key signature. We've already looked at some of those. We looked at the Neapolitan, that's an altered chord, and we spent a long time looking at our secondary dominants. Okay, those are altered chords also. Augmented 6 chords are a really neat family of chords that are used in the 18th century. They're part of the classical era, but they really come into their own in the 19th century, especially one of the chords that you'll talk about. So, what really you need to know about augmented 6 chords is that they are dominant preparation chords. Okay, they lead to 5. Sometimes these chords are called predominants, right? But that's what they do. All the augmented 6 chords behave the same way, and they lead ultimately to a 5 chord. Okay, which can then do what 5 chords do, either go to the tonic or to 6 or to something else. Okay, there are 3 main types of augmented 6 chords. There is the Italian, the German, and the French. There is nothing Italian or German or French, respectively, about these chords. Those names are fairly meaningless, although they are totally standard, so everyone knows what you mean when you say an Italian 6 chord. There are 1 or 2 augmented 6 that are not here, that are referred to in the literature in different ways. There's a chord called the Swiss 6th, which is also sometimes called the English 6th. But these are the big 3, the Italian, the German, and the French. And it's important to remember, and just sort of lock it away, that all of these chords come from the minor mode. And what that means is that they really appear first in minor keys, and it's best for your practice if you think about them coming from the minor mode. This is important later when we're building them. They appear in major keys all the time. But when one is building one, you have to make sure that they agree with the minor mode of whatever key signature you're in. Okay? So here's how they work. An augmented 6 chord contains an augmented 6th interval that expands outward to an octave on 5. All the augmented 6 chords work this way. They have an augmented 6th interval that expands outward by semitone to an octave on 5. Okay? So here are 2. Here's one in C minor and one in B minor. So we have this funky interval, an A flat to an F sharp. Okay? And this interval is going to expand outward by semitone. So the F sharp goes up to G, which is 5, and the A flat goes down to G, which is 5, and you get an octave on 5, and that is an augmented 6 interval. And in B minor, it's the same. Okay? You have an octave on 5, F sharp, and there's a note that expands up to, it goes up to F sharp, which is E sharp, and there's a note that goes down to F sharp, which is G. Okay? So here's your augmented 6. And all of the augmented 6 chords, whether it's Italian, German, or French, they all work this way. You start with this augmented 6 interval, and it expands outward by semitone to an octave on 5. Okay? And usually as part of a 5 chord. Not always, as we'll see in a moment, but the point is that they do expand outward to this octave, which ultimately will function as the dominant. So that is the real crux of the issue with augmented 6 chords. And we name these chords for that interval. Okay? With respect to the Italian and the German and the French, how do you tell the difference? Well, the easiest thing is to think of these chords as being drawn from source chords. The Italian source chord is a 4 chord. The German is a 4-7, and the French is a 2-7. And if you want to build these chords, this is the process. You start with an octave on 5, you put the augmented 6 inside, and then you complete using the notes from the source chord. So let's do that. So if we were in this key, and say we were in the key of F minor, and we wanted a German 6th. So we put an octave on 5, and in F minor, sure enough, augmented sixth interval inside it. So we need a note that if it goes up a semitone, it's going to get to a C, and a note that if it goes down a semitone, it's going to get to a C. And that will give us a D natural, and it will give us a D flat. D flat's in the key signature. Now I've got my augmented sixth interval. Now I complete using my source chord, and I want a German. So the notes on the German six are drawn from the 4/7. So if you're in the minor key signature, the chords are actually very, very easy to complete. All I have to do is just think about basic pitch names. In any F key, the notes of a 4/7 chord are going to be B, D, F, A. Well, I've got my D, I've got my B. So I need F. Now I have a German sixth. Do another one. E minor. Start with, and I want a French sixth in E minor. So I want French sixth. E minor. I start with an octave on 5. Done that. Put my augmented sixth inside it. I need to note that if it goes up to, that's going to go up a semitone to B, then that would be an A sharp. And a note that's going to go down a semitone to B, that's a C. Great. Now, the notes of a French sixth come from 2/7. In any E key, the notes of a 2/7 chord are going to be F, A, C, E. Got the C, got the A, French sixth. It's that easy. One more. Remember what I was saying about remembering that these chords come from a minor mode? Well, what if we do G major? And I want a German sixth in G minor, in G major. I'm going to go through my process. My octave on 5. Now I need to put my augmented sixth inside. So, what's going to go up a semitone to D? Well, C sharp, of course. Now what's going to go down a semitone to D? E flat. And if I were in G minor, the E would be flat already. Okay? So I have to be thinking about G minor and how it is B flat and E flat in the key signature. G key, German, comes from 4/7. Any G key, 4 is C, 7, C, E, G, B. These two notes I had to chromatically put in myself. In G minor, they would have already been there, because in G minor, the B's are flat and E's are flat. Okay? All right. One or two things about each chord. The Italian. Okay? The Italian only has 3 pitches in it. Okay? This is very important. Okay? So if you see an augmented sixth chord and it only has 3 pitches, it's almost certainly an Italian sixth. Okay? Now the German, of all the augmented sixth chords, the German is the one that is the most far-reaching and interesting in the way that it is used. And as I said, these chords do appear in classical era practice. They appear in Haydn and Mozart all over the place. But it is in the 19th century, it's in the music of Schubert and Chopin and Brahms and Schumann that these chords really, really take off, and the German is the one that is used most extensively in interesting ways, and that is because the German is an enharmonic equivalent to a dominant seventh chord. Hugely important. this chord, for example, this German sixth. E flat, G, B flat is a major triad. E flat to D flat, if I were to rewrite the C sharp as D flat, is a minor seventh. So if you play a German sixth, it sounds every bit like a dominant seventh chord. That wants to resolve seven. And this fact allows composers to pun on the German sixth and to pun on the dominant seventh. Often, German sixth chords are used and redefined as if they are the dominant, and dominant sevenths are redefined as if they are German sixth chords. In G, for example, what would this be if we rewrote it? E flat, G, B flat, D flat. What would it be 5/7 of? It would be 5/7 of the Neapolitan. So we could use this chord to modulate to the Neapolitan. And in same key, if I do my dominant seventh chord, D, F sharp, A, C, and I rewrite it, now I have an augmented seventh, an augmented sixth interval. So the D is going to move down to C sharp. The B sharp is going to go up to C sharp, and now that's 5. What's it 5 of? It allows me to modulate to the leading tone. So the German sixth is used in countless ways in the 19th century to get to keys that are not easily accessible. The other thing about the German sixth chord is that it usually resolves to a tonic 6/4, then to 5. And that is because if G minor, if I want to build a German sixth, I go through my process, got my octave on 5, what do I do next? I put the augmented sixth interval in it. Comes from a 4/7 chord, C, E, G, B flat, or C, E, G, B. If I resolve this to a 5 chord, E flat is going to go down to D, and this B flat is going to go down to A. And I'm going to have parallel fits. So what I would do is sort of tonics of 4. Then resolve 5. So minor keys. German sixth. Tonic 6/4. Finally, the French sixth is 2 major thirds, a whole tone apart. That can be useful when one is confronted with an augmented sixth. D, and all of a sudden I've got now if I look at this chord, and I try to make a functional 7th chord out of it, I'm going to run into problems. A Roman numeral analysis process is the same. What are my pitches? So I've got a B flat and a D and an E and a G sharp, okay? I would try to find the root, and I would find that I have E and I have B flat. And I have E and I have G sharp, and I have B flat, and I have D. And I notice that I have this funky interval in here. G sharp to B flat. That's a diminished second. And I don't have any functional chords that have a diminished third in it, excuse me. From G sharp to B flat is a diminished third. Minor triads don't have them, diminished triads don't have them. But if you invert a diminished third, you get an augmented sixth. I can also see that apropos of the French sixth, that this is 2 major thirds, B flat to D, and E to G sharp, French sixth. Or I can say, well, what from what chord, Roman numeral wise, does this seem to be drawn? And it's an E chord in D. It seems to be drawn from a 2/7 chord, and it's a French sixth. That's where the French sixth comes from. And this would result to